The entrance, you will notice two big hills that are carved out that resemble apartment complexes. These are the nuns' convent and the monks' dormitory, built or chiseled out after the 9th century. As you pass through the turnstiles, across the clearing is the first chapel you can visit, the Chapel of St. Basil. Though it is one of the smaller chapels, the Chapel of St. Basil is great to understand what a simple cave church in Cappadocia looks like. Once you walk in, you'll notice many rectangular-shaped holes in the ground. These were the tombs of some of the members of the community. Just so I'm clear about this, no families lived here. It was a community of monks and nuns only. So, important members of this religious community were buried inside some of the chapels. If you walk to the left and inside the main section of this chapel, you'll find some of the less sophisticated paintings of this museum. These red paintings were applied on the bare rock surface with no primer, and this is called red ochre painting. It's a deep, earthy red-brown color that was extensively used in Cappadocia. Most of these red paintings are from the 10th and 11th century. Maltese crosses or floral and geometrical patterns adorn the interior of many of the cave churches. The same red painting could also be used to depict some of the important saints for the communities of Cappadocia. One such saint is the world-famous warrior Saint George. You can find two very similar depictions of warriors on horseback with lances in their hands. The other warrior saint is Saint Theodore. The easiest way to tell the difference between these two saints is the color of the horse. In every representation of these two saints you will come across in the museum, Saint George always has the white horse and the brown horse belongs to Saint Theodore. Next to the depiction of Saint Theodore, you can find a depiction of Saint Basil. I can tell you why he's important as you make your way further inside the Open Air Museum. Leave the chapel and follow the path to the right. In the first centuries of Christianity, monks lived alone and they kept away from society. But everything changed with Basil of Caesarea, known today as Saint Basil. Saint Basil lived here in Cappadocia in the 4th century and created a new monastic system. Instead of isolation, he encouraged communal life. Monks, in his ideal, would live together in organized communities, sharing knowledge, food, and responsibilities. These monasteries became centers of education. Local farmers and merchants were allowed to visit. They could attend services, speak with monks, and learn about Christianity. This was important because most people at the time were illiterate. They could not read the Bible, so the monks explained the life of Jesus through storytelling and images. Some of these images depict local saints, but as you discover the Open Air Museum, you'll find many familiar depictions from the Bible, such as the Crucifixion or the Last Supper. Some scenes are elaborate frescoes, some others are made with the simpler red painting. When large monastic centers like this were built close to populated areas, Christianity spread more rapidly. So these depictions you can see inside the cave churches are not just for decoration, they were visual sermons. There are many churches and chapels here. All of them are cave churches carved directly into the rock. Cappadocia's rock is soft, volcanic tuff, commonly mistaken with the tufa rock. The tuff rock is spelled T-U-F-F. Think of tuff as tough enough to hold a shape, but soft enough to carve with a simple chisel. And that is why entire houses, churches, kitchens, and dining halls could be shaped out of stone. One of the churches visitors enjoy the most is the Apple Church. Structurally, this church feels more sophisticated. It has 4 carved columns supporting 9 domes with a larger central dome. The ground plan resembles a cross, a plus shape, sometimes described as a Maltese cross form. Unlike the simple red paintings in the Chapel of St. Basil, the decorations of this church evolved over time. Originally in the 11th century, it had simple red decorative paintings. But about a century later, the community became wealthier. They received donations from local believers. With that money, they invited a master painter to repaint the interior. The artist first applies a smooth layer of plaster onto the rock surface. Then pigments were applied. The painting bonds chemically with the plaster on the wall, and with this technique, they were able to achieve more vibrant, long-lasting images. Let me tell you about some of the scenes here. To better find what I'll be talking about, go inside and keep your back to the door. In front of you, you can find the main apse, which is a semicircular recess, and inside this recess is a recurring scene in Cappadocia, the Supplication. It is the scene where the Virgin Mary and St. John the Baptist are pleading for the salvation of humanity. Between them is a depiction of Jesus sitting on a throne. Right in front of this recess is one of the smaller domes of the Apple Church. So if you look straight up, there is a painting of the Archangel Michael holding an orb in his hand, and the orb, to some people, resembles an apple. This is one of the reasons why people say the church is named the Apple Church. Some others say it's because of the nearby apple tree. If you look up at the center of the church, you can find a depiction of Christ Almighty inside the main dome. Christ is shown holding the Gospels. On the corners of the columns that support this dome are the portraits of the four evangelists: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Looking around the church, you'll realize that many of the paintings are missing sections or entire areas are blank, and that's mainly because of humidity or water damage. The plaster peels off as it comes in contact with water or if it's too humid inside the church. The left side of the church seems to be more affected than the other parts. Underneath the frescoes, we can see the red ochre painting and the geometrical patterns alongside the Maltese cross. Let's look at the wall on the right. At the center is one of the better preserved depictions of the crucifixion of Jesus. At the center is Jesus on the cross, on the left is the Virgin Mary, and on the right side, the only apostle present during this event, John the Apostle. The most curious part of the scene is the celestial iconography. If you look at the upper side of the scene, you can find a white circle with a portrait of a figure inside, and on the opposite side is a red circle with another figure. These represent the moon and the sun, referring to the event as told in the Gospels. Darkness came over the whole land from the 6th to the 9th hour while Jesus was on the cross. On the right side of the painting, we can also find the centurion who said, "Surely he was the Son of God." In Cappadocia churches, we can sometimes find that scenes follow the timeline of the Bible. Here, above to the left of the crucifixion scene, is the kiss of Judas, or the betrayal of Christ. Another scene that complements this timeline can be found inside the small recess on the right side of the church. It is the Last Supper scene, which in this church suffered some water damage. The center of the painting is peeled off, and as such, most people would assume you would not be able to see a depiction of Jesus on this scene. However, the earlier depictions of the Last Supper in this region did not imagine Jesus sitting at the center of the table. Rather, as tradition would have it, the leader or the more important person in the group would be sitting at the head of the table, and Jesus is always depicted on the left side of the table. We can partially see his depiction on the left of the table, and Jesus on this depiction is holding a piece of paper in his hand. This reminds us that Jesus is the source of all wisdom, and it is a recurring theme in Byzantine iconography. Now let's turn around and look at the only entrance of the church. On your left, there are two well-preserved paintings. One of them is the triumphal entry, or Jesus riding into Jerusalem. This is the scene where Jesus is depicted on a donkey riding into Jerusalem with people celebrating his coming. He is depicted on a donkey rather than a horse to emphasize that Jesus is not a warrior riding into combat, but a king of peace. This is the event that is celebrated right before Easter on Palm Sunday. To the left of triumphal entry is the resurrection of Lazarus, or the raising of Lazarus. This is the scene that depicts one of the miracles of Jesus. Lazarus comes out of the cave where he was entombed after Jesus says, "Lazarus, come out." In Eastern Christianity, the day before Palm Sunday is celebrated as Lazarus Saturday. Before we leave the Apple Church, let's look at the right side of the door. There are two more scenes here that partially survived the water damage. The one closer to the door is the Transfiguration of Jesus. It is the scene where the identity of Jesus as a Messiah and Son of God is confirmed. Jesus is at the center of this scene. It's as if there is a bright light which emanates from him. Jesus is talking to Elijah, who is on the left, and Moses, who is on the right side. To the right side of this painting is the baptism of Jesus. Jesus is depicted inside the river, and John the Baptist is on the left, and two angels on the right bear witness to this event. Next to the feet of Jesus is a small figure and looks like a small man. This figure is not a man, it represents the Jordan River itself. In the old days of pagans, a small man represented the Jordan River. Including a pagan river god in a Christian painting may sound controversial, and we can come up with different explanations for it. It may be to show that even the pagan gods would bear witness to the baptism of Jesus and recognize him as the Son of God. This can be discussed, so I'll leave any further deliberations to you. One final symbolism is at the top of this painting. It is the dove that represents the Holy Spirit which descends from heaven. After you visit the Apple Church and walk further up the road, you'll first reach the small dining room and storage area found inside the caves with two small doors. After that, an area with trees where groups take photos, and the Snake Church will be on your right and the Chapel of St. Barbara on your left. Let's first take a quick look at the Chapel of St. Barbara. The paintings inside the Chapel of St. Barbara look as if they were not drawn by professionals. It seems the monks tried to adorn the interior with floral patterns and some animals that seemed important to them. At a later date, a professional artist painted some other scenes such as the warrior saints St. George and St. Theodore, Christ Almighty found in the apse, and St. Barbara on the left side of the church. So, St. Barbara lived as the daughter of a rich pagan man in the Syrian city of Heliopolis. She was known for her beauty, but decided to become a devout believer in Christ after meeting other Christians in the city. The father was enraged, and St. Barbara was tortured, after which she prayed to the Lord, and her wounds were healed. During a public torture, a local Christian woman named Juliana opposed the violence and was dragged and tortured alongside St. Barbara. They were later martyred, and today they are venerated as saints. Now, let's walk to the Snake Church and take a look at the paintings inside. It is, as they say, a barrel-walled church. Simply put, it resembles a tunnel, but there's only one way in and out. As soon as you enter, on the left is the scene that gives this church its name. It is the scene with two warrior saints, St. George and St. Theodore, fighting against the snake. If you heard of the story before, you might be thinking, was it not a dragon that St. George slays? And you're not wrong. In the West, it is usually a dragon. In the Eastern Church, the painting of the foe resembles a snake or a serpent. They might have used a snake to represent the pagans or anti-Christians, as the serpent was a commonly used symbol that represented healing or immortality before the Christians. It was these people that persecuted the first Christians, so maybe the Christians used a serpent as a symbol that represents the pagans who persecuted them. As always, St. George is on a white horse and St. Theodore is on his brown horse. The other painting on the left wall, further inside the church, is a scene that depicts Emperor Constantine and his mother, St. Helena, holding a great cross. St. Helena was a Christian, and it is told that she influenced her son, the emperor, in favor of her religion. Constantine the Great was the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. We will come across this scene in many of the churches as it represents the discovery of the true cross. Saint Helena, during her pilgrimage to the Holy Land, discovered the true cross, which means the cross that Jesus was crucified upon. On the site where they discovered the true cross, the Emperor Constantine and Saint Helena ordered and financed the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. As for what happened to the cross, the pieces of wood were sent all around the Roman Empire to be kept as holy relics. At the center of the church, right across the entrance, is a depiction of Jesus and what seems to be a small child. This small child is in fact an adult and was the donor of the church. His contributions to the construction and paintings of this church earned him a place next to Jesus, but the donor is depicted as a smaller figure as he is not as important as Jesus. On the right wall of the church are three saints. The saint closest to the door is Saint Basil. He is depicted with his ceremonial vestments that have crosses embroidered on them. At the center is Saint Thomas, one of the apostles of Christ, and also known as Doubting Thomas, as he was initially doubtful of the resurrection of Jesus. He traveled to India and preached the gospel there. By some, he is regarded as the patron saint of India and well known by Christians who live there. The last figure on the left is Saint Onofrius. It's spelled Onuphrus, Onofrius. He practiced physical and spiritual restraints, so he was a part of the asceticism movement. In his late years, he went into the desert as the hermits did. He was a famed hermit, and other hermits consulted him. The depiction is of an old man with a long white beard. He is almost completely naked, with only desert plants covering his loins. The church is also named after this saint, so it's called both the Snake Church or the Church of Saint Onofrius. As we leave the Snake Church, if you'd like to explore more of the Goreme Open Air Museum, I suggest you follow the path on your right. As we walk up, you'll find more caves on the side of the hill. Some of them are kitchens and storage areas, others are churches and chapels. After the small caves, you will find a larger area with kitchens, refectories, and storage rooms, and also a beautiful view of the valley below. The refectory was the dining hall. Long stone tables carved directly into the rock. Looking at these stone tables, you can imagine monks sitting in silence, eating simple meals, listening to scripture being read aloud. There are multiple caves here that were used as kitchens, storage areas, and dining halls. The cave all the way to the top is a small church with many depictions of the Maltese cross. In the same area where you can find the dining halls is a church named the Dark Church. At first glance, the name sounds sinister, but the reality is the naming was very literal. With only a small window to bring sunlight in, it was dark inside the church. Today, there is ample lighting inside for a comfortable visit, and the fact that the paintings were protected from the sunlight means the paintings are in a very good state. There is a separate entrance fee for this church alone, and it's completely worth it for travelers who are interested in religious history or art. If you're on a strict budget, you can find some of the scenes from the Dark Church inside the Sandal Church, which is further ahead. If you are using this episode as an audio guide while visiting the museum and do not wish to pay for the extra entrance fee, you can skip this section. Just hold on before you skip though. If you are finding this guide helpful, please leave a quick rating or review. It's the best way to support the show and helps us keep these history-heavy deep dives coming. And it costs less than the entrance fee, specifically 0 to like and subscribe. By the way, we're using timestamps and chapters, so depending on where you're listening to this episode, you should be able to skip without missing any important parts. So after this short shameless plug, let's visit the Dark Church. The outer section of the Dark Church seems to have collapsed. The interior with the frescoes is surprisingly well preserved, considering the church is from the 12th century. After squeezing through a small entrance, we reach the well-adorned interior. The first thing that greets the visitors is the depiction Ascension of Jesus. The Virgin Mary, 2 angels on her 2 sides, and further above, Jesus in a circle that seems to be carried by 4 angels on 4 corners. On the 14th day of Easter, the Feast of Ascension is celebrated. There are many scenes in this well-preserved church, and I always prefer to start with the dome and the center recess. So we approach the center of the church, and when we look up, there is Christ Almighty. And right below this common depiction of Jesus is a not-so-common depiction of Jesus. It is Jesus depicted as a child. You can identify this portrait of young Jesus as inside the halo behind his head is a cross. We don't regularly see depictions of Jesus at this age. Inside the main apse or the recess of the church is the supplication. It is the scene where the Virgin Mary and St. John the Baptist are pleading for the salvation of humanity. Jesus is depicted as sitting on a throne between them. The donors of the church can be found kneeling before Jesus in this depiction. These men paid for the construction and painting efforts of this church and were honored with this painting in the centerpiece of the church. After looking at the main recess, let's continue along the left wall of the church. The 4 gospel writers greet us here. Right above the small recess on the left, where you can find a beautiful depiction of the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus, is the depiction of 2 of the evangelists, Luke and Matthew. To the left is the scene where John and Mark are depicted writing the gospel. If we move further to the left along this wall, we come across 2 scenes. The first is the Archangel Gabriel, depicted with wings, holding an orb in his hand. Right above this is the Nativity or Birth of Jesus. This is actually a collection of scenes rather than a single scene. In this collection, we can find the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus right alongside her and some animals to show that he was born in a stable. To the left is Joseph, who seems to be deep in thought, as is the customary way he is depicted. To the bottom right of the collection are 2 women giving bath to baby Jesus in a small basin that resembles a baptismal font. This is an apocryphal story, which means a non-biblical story. It is actually written in the Proto-Evangelium of James, but not in the Bible used by many Western disciplines of Christianity. In the earlier days of the church, earlier Gospels mentioned two midwives helping the Virgin Mary give birth to baby Jesus. These women are Salome and Zabel. Salome had her doubts about the virgin birth, and while trying to confirm the condition of the Virgin Mary physically, her hands were burned with fire, but later they were healed as she touched baby Jesus. The bath scene shows us that baby Jesus was a real human being who needs actual care. The baby Jesus in the cradle has a light shining on him, and if you follow this ray of light, you'll find the Star of Bethlehem or the Christmas star. In the biblical account, the star appears to the Magi, or the three wise men, and it signals the birth of the King of the Jews. These three men come bearing gifts that have symbolic meaning. One of the gifts is gold, that symbolizes Jesus as the King of the Jews. The second is frankincense, which is an aromatic resin used in worship and as such symbolizes divinity. The third gift is myrrh, spelled M-Y-R-R-H, another resin, but this time used for embalming, symbolizing the death of Jesus for humanity. In the same depiction, you may also find a man with a flute in his hand, sitting on a small mound. The Greek inscription next to him tells us that his name is Sator, S-A-T-O-R. He is one of the shepherds who witnessed the birth of Jesus according to earlier gospel. In some other early Byzantine examples, we can find two other shepherds named Arepon and Tenetor. These names seem to be derived from the famous Sator Square, an ancient Roman palindrome. These were 5 words consisting of 5 letters each, written on separate lines, forming a 5x5 grid that reads the same vertically, horizontally, and even forwards and backwards. The words are Sator, Arepo, Tenet, Opera, and Rotas. This grid of letters were used as a protective charm. It was also used as a secret way to write Pater Noster, which means Our Father. This was of course during the persecution of Christians, and such secrecy was necessary. As we move further to the left, you'll find a warrior saint below, and the scene Journey to Bethlehem right above it. The warrior has a spear in his hand and a sword on his back. He is Saint Eustace, an early martyr in Christianity. As his colorful cloak shows us, he was of high social standing, and a sword signifies that he was a warrior. He was a general in the Roman army. He has a spear in his hand because he saw visions of the cross while he was hunting and then converted to Christianity. He and his family were martyred as they chose not to participate in the sacrifice to Roman pagan gods. Above St. Eustace is the Journey to Bethlehem. This is the scene that depicts the travel of the Virgin Mary and Joseph from Nazareth to Bethlehem for the Roman census. In the scene is a second man who seems to be leading the family. That is James, Joseph's son from his first marriage. So James is the half-brother of Jesus, who in this scene is yet to be born. To the left side of this painting is the baptism of Jesus. Jesus is depicted inside the river, and John the Baptist is on the left, and an angel on the right bears witness to this event. Next to the feet of Jesus is a small figure, looks like a small man. This figure is not a man, but represents the Jordan River in the old pagan belief. To the left is the entryway into the second half of the church that we are standing in. It seems there used to be a doorway which collapsed. Still, the outlines of the door is visible. Above the door, on the wall, is the Transfiguration of Jesus. Jesus is at the center of the scene. It's as if there's a bright light which emanates from him. Jesus is talking to Elijah, who is on the left, and Moses, who is on the right side. We can also find 3 figures who seem to be hiding behind some rocks. These are from left to right, Peter, John, and James. Jesus takes them for prayers to Mount Tabor, which is a mountain in Israel, and then shines with bright rays of light. This event is celebrated during the Feast of the Transfiguration by many Christian communities. Above the Transfiguration of Jesus scene is the triumphal entry, or Jesus riding into Jerusalem. This is the scene where Jesus is depicted on a donkey riding into Jerusalem with people celebrating his coming. In this scene, we can clearly see people gathered with colorful garments in their hands. This detail makes the scene feel more festive. Jesus is depicted on a donkey rather than a horse to emphasize that Jesus is not a warrior riding into combat, but a king of peace. Let's continue towards the left side of this collapsed doorway. There is the resurrection of Lazarus, or the raising of Lazarus. We have come across this scene before in the Apple Church. It's one of the miracles of Jesus. Jesus shouts, "Lazarus, come out," and Lazarus is depicted coming out of the cave where he was entombed with the burial shrouds covering his body. Further to the left are two scenes. The one at the bottom is Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena holding the true cross. This scene is a reminder that Saint Helena found the true cross and his son was the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. Above the scene is the myrrh bearers, two women standing, an angel showing them something, and the soldiers guarding the entrance of the sealed tomb. This scene depicts the morning of the resurrection of Jesus. The women are carrying myrrh, a perfumed oil intended to be used to anoint the body of Jesus. The angel, however, shows to the women that the tomb is empty. A spiral made of strips of white cloth, which was the shroud for the body of Christ, and the sudarium or the headcloth, all lying on the ground with nobody to be seen, shows us that the tomb is empty. This makes these women, one of whom is Mary Magdalene, the first people to witness the resurrection of Jesus. This is why Mary Magdalene is given the title Apostle to the Apostles, as she announced the resurrection of Jesus to the disciples. As we continue along the left, Archangel Michael greets us with the crucifixion and the betrayal scene right above. The crucifixion scene in the dark church is very detailed. The Virgin Mary is to the left, and John the Apostle is to the right of the cross. The Roman soldier is further to the right. It's the one who says, "Indeed, this was the Son of God." Right next to the cross are the soldiers, one holding the spear with a sponge attached, offering vinegar to Jesus, the other soldier with the lance who pierced the side of Jesus to confirm he was dead. The sun and the moon can be found above the cross, which signify the darkness over the land. Above the crucifixion scene is the betrayal of Judas. This scene looks chaotic. There's a crowd of soldiers with spears in hand gathered in the background. Judas is seen as hugging Jesus. The only other apostle visible in the scene is Peter, who is holding a dagger or knife in his hand. When the soldiers wanted to grab Jesus, Peter attacked Malchus, a servant to the high priest of Israel, who plotted to kill Jesus. Peter didn't kill Malchus but sliced his right ear, and so in the scene, Peter is depicted holding the right ear of Malchus in his hand. Let's move further to the left. This is an interesting corner as we come across two scenes that are not very common in Cappadocia churches. The one at the bottom is the fiery furnace, a story from the Old Testament in the book of Daniel. There is an angel in the scene who seems to be holding his hands over three men inside flames. This is the story where the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, commands everyone to worship a golden statue. When three Hebrew officials refuse to worship the golden statue, King Nebuchadnezzar orders his soldiers to throw these three men into a blazing hot furnace. The furnace is so hot that the soldiers who throw the men in are burned themselves. The king witnesses 4 men walking among the flames, and later 3 men emerge from the flames unharmed. The king, having witnessed the events, praises their God and promotes them into higher positions in Babylon. Above the fiery furnace is a scene called Anastasis, or the Resurrection. It can also be referred to as the Harrowing of Hell. Jesus is seen with a cross-topped staff in one hand, a staff that resembles the papal ferula, also called the papal rod. He is standing tall on top of a figure lying on the ground. There's a crowd in the scene, and Jesus, who is at the center, is holding someone by the arm, and seems this person is being pulled up by Jesus. This is an apocryphal story from the Gospel of Nicodemus, also known as the Acts of Pilate. Jesus, after the crucifixion, descends into limbo and breaks the door to pieces, which can be seen on the lower right corner of the scene. Jesus then defeats Hades, who in the earlier pagan belief was the god of the underworld, the place where everyone goes after death. Hades is the figure under the feet of Jesus. chained up, showing that he is defeated. After defeating Hades, Jesus rescues the souls of the righteous from Hades, and this is shown with the figures being rescued. Jesus is holding Adam's arm. Right beside Adam is Eve. To the right of the scene also stand King Solomon and King David. Let's look at the final corner of the church. To the left is the small recess. Inside is a depiction of Abraham. Below this is the painting of a cloth with the face of Jesus in the middle. This is another apocryphal or non-biblical story. According to this story, the king of Edessa, who is ill, asks Jesus to come and heal him. As a response, Jesus presses his face against a towel, which leaves his image on the fabric. The messenger takes this fabric back to his king, and the king, having received the towel, makes a full recovery. This is also known as the image of Edessa. Let's look at the final painting right above the recess. It is the best preserved depiction of the Last Supper in Cappadocia. As this is a more traditional and earlier depiction, Jesus sits at the left end of the table, marking his position as the leader of the group. St. Peter, the oldest among the apostles, is at the other end of the table. In the scene, we can also identify Judas as he has one hand in a dish. On the table in a plate is not lamb, but fish served as the food in this Eastern version of the Last Supper. The main reason for this is the importance of fish as a symbol for early Christians. The word for fish in Greek is ichthys, and these 5 letters in Greek served as an acrostic for Jesus Christ, the Son of God, Savior. During the Roman persecution, the fish symbol was commonly used by the early believers, and we can find the fish symbol carved on marble roads in the ancient cities along the Mediterranean coast. Let's leave the dark church and keep on exploring. The final caves in the upper sections of the Open Air Museum can be found after you pass the dark church. You'll first come across the Chapel of St. Catherine, and finally the Sandal Church with another dining hall below the church. Let's look at the Chapel of St. Catherine first. It resembles the first chapel of the museum, as it was used as a burial site for the local monks. At the entrance of the chapel, 3 distinct types of crosses are visible. The one on the left is a cross pate. It resembles the iron cross. The one in the middle is the Maltese cross. The one on the right is a Greek cross, as in all arms of the cross are equal. The paintings of this church were unfortunately badly damaged. The story of St. Catherine is like this. St. Catherine, the Princess of Alexandria, protests against the persecution of Christians. The emperor, who wants to contradict her arguments, summons the best philosophers of the land. They are so impressed by her arguments that these philosophers convert to Christianity. The emperor then orders her to be tortured on a wheel with spikes, which shatters when she touches it. This torture device later became known as the Catherine wheel. When torture failed, she was martyred. After the Chapel of St. Catherine, there is a corner on the right with 3 caves. The first one on the right usually serves as the museum cafeteria. Next to it is the refectory, or the dining hall. A long table was carved on the rock, but the ends of the table were adorned with paintings. The end closer to the entrance has a Maltese cross. On the far end of the table is the Last Supper scene. This scene unfortunately suffered some water damage. The stairs outside the dining hall take us into the Sandal Church. The paintings of the Sandal Church are from around the 12th century. They are very similar to those paintings from the Dark Church and the Apple Church. In the main dome of the church is a depiction of Jesus, and right below this is the depiction of young Jesus. You can identify him with the cross inside the halo. It is not very common to see Jesus depicted around this age. On the 4 corners supporting this main dome are the 4 gospel writers: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Across the entrance and inside the main recess is the supplication, the scene where the Virgin Mary and St. John the Baptist are pleading for the salvation of humanity. Between them is a depiction of Jesus. If you approach this painting and look down, you would find a set of prints on the rock surface. It looks as if someone wearing sandals left their footprints here, which is why this church is called the Sandal Church. Above this, inside a small dome, is the Archangel Gabriel holding an orb in his hand. To the left of Gabriel is Resurrection of Lazarus, or the Raising of Lazarus. This is the scene that depicts one of the miracles of Jesus. Lazarus comes out of the cave where he was entombed after Jesus says, "Lazarus, come out." On the opposite side is the depiction of Road to Golgotha. This is where Jesus carries the cross before his crucifixion. Let's continue along the left wall. In the small recess is a painting of the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus in her arms. Above this painting is the hospitality of Abraham. In this story from Genesis, Abraham shows great hospitality to 3 men by offering them food and rest. One of the visitors tells Abraham that his wife Sarah would have a son in a year. Sarah, being a 90-year-old woman, thinks this is impossible, but later would give birth to Isaac. The 3 men are revealed as the Lord and 2 angels. This is right before the events in Sodom. To the left are 2 paintings that are unfortunately badly damaged. Further along the left, above the crucifixion scene, are 2 depictions. To the right is Betrayal of Judas, where Judas betrays Jesus by identifying him in front of the church officials. The depiction on the left is the triumphal entry. It's Jesus traveling into Jerusalem. The crucifixion scene, just like the other paintings of this church, seems to have suffered a lot of damage. To the left of this wall are the paintings that describe the events of the birth of Jesus. In the Nativity, or birth of Jesus, Virgin Mary sits with baby Jesus right alongside her, and some animals to show that he was born in a stable. To the left is Joseph, who seems to be deep in thought. To the bottom right are 2 women giving bath to baby Jesus in a small basin that resembles a baptismal font. This is a non-biblical story. Early Gospels mention 2 midwives helping the Virgin Mary give birth. These women are Salome and Zabel. Salome had her doubts about the virgin birth, and while trying to confirm the condition of the Virgin Mary physically, her hands were burned with fire, but later they were healed as she touched baby Jesus. The bath scene shows us that baby Jesus was a real human who needs actual care. In the biblical account, the Star of Bethlehem appears to the Magi, or the 3 wise men, and it signals the birth of the King of the Jews. They come with gifts that have symbolic meaning. One gift, gold, that symbolizes Jesus as the King of the Jews. The second is frankincense, which is an aromatic resin used in worship and as such symbolizes divinity. The third gift is myrrh, spelled M-Y-R-R-H, another resin, but this time used for embalming, symbolizing the death of Jesus for humanity. In the same depiction, there's a man with a flute in his hand sitting on a small mound. The Greek inscription next to him tells us that his name is Sator, S-A-T-O-R. He is one of the shepherds who witnessed the birth of Jesus according to earlier gospel. In this depiction, we can find the other shepherds named Arepon and Tenetor. These names seem to be derived from the famous Sator Square, an ancient Roman palindrome. These were 5 words consisting of 5 letters each, written on separate lines, forming a 5x5 grid that reads the same vertically, horizontally, and even forwards and backwards. The words are Sator, Arepo, Tenet, Opera, and Rotas. This grid of letters were used as a protective charm. It was also used as a secret way to write Pater Noster, which means Our Father. This was of course during the persecution of Christians, and such secrecy was necessary. Above the birth of Jesus scene is the Transfiguration. Jesus is at the center and a bright light emanates from him. Jesus is talking to Elijah, who is on the left, and Moses, who is on the right side. 3 men seem to be hiding behind some rocks. These are from left to right, Peter, John, and James. Jesus takes them for prayers to Mount Tabor, which is a mountain in Israel, and then shines with bright rays of light. This event is celebrated during the Feast of the Transfiguration by many Christian communities. Right below the birth of Jesus scene are 4 figures. The person with the halo is a saint, while the others were donors of the church. The donor on the left looks different than the others. He is wearing the turban, a traditional Turkish headgear made of a cloth wrapped around the hat. He also has a kaftan, spelled K-A-F-T-A-N, a kaftan, which is a long robe that makes him look like a sultan. And many visitors misidentify him as a Muslim sultan, but he seems to be a Christian man who donated money to this church. Let's look to the left of this wall. Above is a big depiction of the Ascension of Jesus. The apostles are below, the Virgin Mary is in the middle, surrounded by angels, and Jesus is depicted sitting, being carried by angels all around him. Below the Ascension of Jesus, there are depictions of saints which are damaged, but we can identify Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena holding the cross. We came across this story before in the Snake Church. If we move to the left and look up, a rare depiction would greet us. This is called Anastasis, or the Resurrection. It can also be referred to as the Harrowing of Hell. Jesus is seen with a cross-topped staff in one hand, a staff that resembles the papal ferula, also called the papal rod. He is standing tall on top of a figure lying on the ground. Jesus seems to be holding someone up, holding him by the arm. This is an apocryphal story from the Gospel of Nicodemus, also known as the Acts of Pilate. Jesus, after the crucifixion, descends into limbo and breaks the door to pieces, which can be seen on the lower right corner of this scene. Jesus then defeats Hades, who in the earlier pagan belief was the god of the underworld, the place where everyone goes after death. Hades is the figure under the feet of Jesus, showing that Hades is defeated. After defeating Hades, Jesus rescues the souls of the righteous from Hades. Jesus is holding Adam's arm. Right beside Adam is Eve. To the right of the scene also stand King Solomon and King David. To the left of this rare depiction is the myrrh-bearers, a scene with two women standing, an angel showing them something, and the soldiers guarding the entrance to the sealed tomb. This scene depicts the morning of the resurrection of Jesus. The women are carrying myrrh, a perfumed oil intended to be used to anoint the body of Jesus. The angel, however, shows to the women that the tomb is empty. A spiral made of strips of white cloth, which was the shroud for the body of Christ, and the sudarium, or the head cloth, all lying on the ground with no body to be seen, show us that the tomb is empty. This makes these women, one of whom is Mary Magdalene, the first people to witness the resurrection of Jesus. This is why Mary Magdalene is given the title Apostle to the Apostles, as she announced the resurrection of Jesus to the disciples. After this church, we can continue walking down the hill, enjoying the scenery. As we do so, I would like to mention another church found outside the Open Air Museum. It is called the Basil Church. After you leave the museum, walk down the hill, and right before you reach the parking and shopping area, there are some steps going up on the right side. If you follow these steps, they will take you to the entrance of the Basil Church. You can visit the Basil Church with the same ticket you used to visit the Open Air Museum, so I hope you followed my advice and kept the ticket. We have a separate episode for the Basil Church, named Basil Church Complete Audio Guide, explaining the beautiful and rare blue frescoes in detail. As we have discovered the Open Air Museum, you have seen that over centuries, erosion, earthquakes, and human activity damaged many structures. Some caves collapsed entirely. What remains today is only a fraction of the original monastic complex. But even this fragment tells an extraordinary story. This place is not grand in the way that marble cathedrals are grand. It is carved, humble, and almost hidden. And perhaps that is what makes it powerful. These cave churches represent a moment when faith, education, art, and daily life were carved into stone. They show us a version of Christianity before major theological divisions. They reflect Greek language and Byzantine artistic tradition. They remind us that images once replaced books for most people. And above all, they show how human beings adapt, turning soft volcanic rock into monasteries, kitchens, tombs, and sacred spaces. Thank you for walking through history with us today. If Goreme captured your imagination, you won't want to miss our upcoming episodes where we dive deep into the underground cities of Cappadocia and answer your most frequently asked travel questions about navigating this unique region. We're exploring every corner of Turkey, from the Mediterranean coast to the ruins of Ephesus. If there's a destination you'd like to hear about, or if you need help planning your own adventure in Turkey, reach out to us at info@realturkeytours.com. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a journey. Until next time.